Hi, I'm Carol Gold.
I'm Steve Clark.
And we're here at Above the Fray podcast. Steve, what are you reading these days?
I'm reading a book by Browne, a libertarian creed, written in the 70s called How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And the gist or the point of the book is the many ways individuals can create freedom in the world. And part of understanding what freedom is understanding the premise behind it and aligning yourselves up with the right people that share your values. So, for example, he gives the case of, well, actually, I'll just make an example between you and I. You and I decide to go into business together. We decide to do like what we're doing here is this podcast. And all of a sudden, I get a call one day from a TV studio and says, we love your show, but what we're going to do is we only want you. We want to exclude Carol. And I say to myself, wow, that's a great deal for me. I'm going to take that money. Carol, see you later. And in that instance, I've done well and you've done poorly. So he goes into the issues that around personal choice and personal freedom. So you care to comment?
Well, as I understand it, are you saying that he's saying that if I get angry at you or disappointed in you or whatever for your choice of excluding me, that I'm right or I'm projecting my values onto you? What is he saying?
What he's saying is that you have to be aware of everybody's values. So basically, the way that you find freedom in the world is understanding the limitations of government, of society, and of other people's values, and knowing what your values are, and then associating yourself with the right people so you don't have these incidences.
Okay, so in your example, then I would have to say to myself, I wrongfully associated myself with someone who had values that were different than my own and I didn't know it.
Correct.
Or I knew it and I ignored it.
That's exactly
for the
right.
moment.
Yes.
Because for me, the decision you would have made to walk away and seize the deal and seize the moment and seize the money and the notoriety for yourself would have been betrayal to a trust that I would have had in you as a business partner.
Correct.
So, okay, well, I would agree with you in that, and him, I would agree with him that you have to have the same, align yourself with people with the same values.
Correct.
I think there's a thin line where some people would say, regardless of individual values, kind of like Plato said, there's the essence of things. So there's the chairness of chair.
Right.
There's the essence of something that is the foundation for the thing itself, that it is unseen. I think that there are values and principles that transcend individual values and principles. So, right. For example, trust. In that situation, I would have felt betrayed of trust. I think trust is something that isn't individual and shouldn't be individual. I think trust is something that ought to be in existence for everyone in every relationship, because if it isn't there, you're not really in a relationship where one cares for the other similarly as one cares for oneself.
So let me just clarify a point. What he's saying is the error, for example, in this transaction you would have made is that you would have chosen incorrectly. You would have aligned yourself with somebody like myself who wasn't trustworthy. You should have aligned yourself with somebody who shared your values and moved forward. And that would have created the freedom for you.
Okay, I
By
get
aligning yourselves with somebody who was not trustworthy, you complicated your life. And all of a sudden you're upset for what? For a bad decision that you made.
So, again, how do I know you're not trustworthy? Because this is an important question.
Right.
If I blame myself for aligning with someone who wasn't trustworthy, I beat myself up when maybe I had no way to know you weren't trustworthy. I was proceeding on the premise that you were trustworthy, because why should I proceed otherwise? Right. Okay. However, there are other situations where we sense that something's wrong and we ignore it. Right. Because we want in the moment to get what we want in the moment.
Correct.
I think there's a difference between having a reasonable expectation that another will treat me as I treat them. There's a difference between that, where I am innocent of your, in my estimation, bad choice of excluding me. I'm innocent of that moment, versus what if I had had some experience with you early on that you lied to me about something
Right.
as we were forming our initial relationship. And I said, okay, well, it's probably a one-time thing. I'm going to let it go. And then it turns out later that the lies are bigger and more complicated. I can't look back and say, how could I have known?
Right.
Right? I knew and I ignored. What we're talking about, I think what he's saying is, yes, you have to align with people with similar values, but I pose the question, Steve, unless you proceed in life under the premise that other people are good until proven otherwise, how do you know if you're aligning with someone who has similar principles?
I think as you get older, it gets easier and easier. You can, with more experience and having been burned in other business situations and understanding the people that they are. I mean, for me, it's a certain trigger point. Somebody could say, I don't know, for example, if I go to a party and somebody says, wow, isn't Obamacare great? Everybody's covered now. We're all going to have great health insurance. I would immediately say, discard that person, A, for not being intelligent, and B, believing a faulty premise. I would be wary of that person's judgment going forward on a one comment.
And I'll go you one better. And I don't know whether this is a higher standard or a more discriminating standard or a more insane standard. But the example I'll give you is if I meet someone and they drink every night of their life.
Well, that's something like that. Something
I
basic.
immediately would, if it were either a dating or a business relationship, I would say to myself, wrong person.
Right.
Don't go there.
So you're proving my point. Everybody gives off clues on an ongoing basis of what they're like.
Yes, and I would agree with you that the older we get, the easier it gets.
It's
Hopefully, because we get smarter or at least we get wiser, hopefully through experience. The other example that I wanted to give is, let's look at something like Black Lives Matter or LGBTQ or any single issue community. When they are trying to impose their value on the rest of society, which example is that? Because one could argue, if you were in the Black community and part of Black Lives Matter, that it is so vital that Black people be seen as equals and Black people receive equal treatment and Black people not be excluded from things simply because they are Black, that imposing the concept of Black Lives Matter to the exclusion of all lives matter is critical and necessary in order to right a wrong, right a cultural wrong. The other side of that is, if you try to say that any life matters more than any other, you're already off the track.
What do you mean by any life? What do you mean by that?
Any life, regardless of color.
Oh,
If
human
you're,
life.
If you're going to try to say this group of lives is more important than this group of lives, you're headed down the road of what was Margaret Sanger? Eugenics. You're the Hitler. That's the Hitler road. These lives are more valuable than these lives. So, which do you think it is with Black Lives Matter?
I think you just said it right there. I think anytime you say one life matters over another life, I think you're going down the wrong path. I think, and even in the Black Lives community, there's been a lot of critique, especially as it relates to the black on black crime, and as it relates to the crime in Chicago. The majority of the deaths is not police related; it's black on black crime. So even in the Black community, there's a sense of outrage of, how come if you're saying Black Lives Matter, then how come we're not addressing the most important issue of all the unnecessary deaths by each other?
So, if we had to sum up what we're talking about situational ethics,
right,
versus absolute ethics, absolute truth. In situational ethics, you can justify a position based on the limited circumstances of the experience you're having. If you deal in absolutes, if you deal in truth, if you believe there's absolute truth, if you believe there's absolute trust, if you believe there's absolute goodness, if you believe there's absolute evil, then it's not situational. In every situation, you will decide the same way because you're fundamentally coming from a position that doesn't alter based on the facts of a particular situation. And so it's a very complicated and interesting conversation because at law, in court, every case does turn on the facts, and that's where you get legal precedent. If you can show that your facts are somewhat different than the precedent that came before, you can get a new ruling that is contrary to the ruling that came before, and that becomes the new law. in a way, the legal system is situational, in a way. Whereas we could argue that religion is more absolute than situational. So that's a much more complicated conversation. We're going to leave it there today. Let you think about situational ethics versus absolute truth. I'm Carol Gold.
I'm Steve Clark.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.